Callie Teegardin, how you doing?
Good, Jim. How are you?
I am doing phenomenal. Thank you so much. Welcome to the Beach Money Podcast. And Jordan, thank you for allowing us to do this together. It's great to see you again.
It is great to see you, and I'm so excited to be here. I absolutely love Jordan and the beach money lifestyle.
What does the beach money lifestyle mean to you?
For me, it was to be able to choose how, when, and where I work and play.
So you get to work from home or from the road or from the beach.
Yeah, from anywhere, maybe a golf course. I love to golf as well. So, yeah, anywhere. I wanted to be able to create a life where I wasn't tied to a 9 to 5, or, back in the day it was more like a 7 to 5 job. And I had a traditional job for years in sales, but I always had a boss who told me how many days of vacation I would get a year. And at one point it was 12, which, if you know anything about me, was not enough. Like, I think life is meant to be lived. And so I was looking for a way to be able to have more than 12 vacation days a year.
I totally agree. If I told you how many vacation days I take right now, well, you might believe it, but the average person it would be unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if 25% of my time is easily leisure time
Right. Yep.
in total, total hours. If the average work week is 40, I get way more off during the week, and certainly more than the standard 2 weeks. How long were you in the grind of the corporate world where they didn't let you out of prison much?
Until my early 30s. So all the way from out of college, 22, to
Yeah.
my early 30s, mid 30s, when I left in 2009. So, and I graduated in 97. So 12 years, 13 years in corporate.
Very similar to mine. I left the corporate world when I was 36.
Okay.
And I had a sales job for the most part with all the companies I worked for. And I worked generally on the road, had an office at home usually. There was one company I worked for where I had an office, at the sales headquarters, if you will. But I traveled a lot from there. I was on the road a lot, but I had a home base. And I decided that I needed to get out. Something called me to leave. It may have been Zig Ziglar. So I tell this story that Zig used to talk to me all the time in my car because I had
Nice.
cassette tapes and CDs back in the day. And he basically convinced me to quit my job. Of course, he didn't know who I was, but I
Nice.
listened to him. And he didn't say, Jim, quit your job, but that's what I heard. I heard that I needed to be doing something else. And I came home one day and told my pregnant wife, while she was holding my 2-year-old son, that I wanted to quit my perfectly good 6-figure income job.
I understand.
And she said yes. And the rest is history. So I understand the story. Very similar story. Yeah.
Right. I love it. It was interesting in college. I was a science major. I thought I originally wanted to be a doctor. And then, yeah, I decided I didn't want to study that much. And my parents told me they would pay for my education if I finished in 4 years. So I had to find out how to go from a science and get some business classes and still end in 4 years. And I had a marketing class my junior year. And the professor had said to everyone, okay, who in this class wants to be a salesperson when you're done with college? And it was myself and one other person. I decided at that point, I'm going to go into sales. I thought at the time pharmaceutical sales never went that way. And he's like, the rest of you are crazy, because who do you think is in the parking lot on Friday afternoons in the RVs, tailgating before the Saturday games? He's like, it's salespeople, because the rest of you aren't going to have time off.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
true. And salespeople make the most money, even more so than doctors in general. In sales, you generally can, not all sales jobs, but generally you can make an unlimited amount of money in sales,
Mhm.
for the
Yeah.
most part, especially if you're commission.
Right.
And you can't do that even as a doctor. I mean, the average doctor doesn't make as much money as people think. I mean, they might make 150, 200, even $250,000 a year. But that's nothing compared to someone who could literally make millions a year in sales.
Yeah, it's so true. And so, yeah, I wanted in sales young and I was always commissioned. And then I took a corporate job, went into management and I was capped at what I could make. And I'm like, and then I was capped on vacation days. I'm like, okay, there's a better way here.
Yeah. And I'll tell you one thing, when you leave prison, and that's what I called it. I mean, I really consider it prison because I mean, they let me out in the yard sometimes. That would be the weekends and vacation.
Right.
Then, back into the cell, back to the grind. Um, After I left at Callie, I can't imagine going back.
Agreed.
Like, there's no way. And I don't know about you, but when I left the corporate world, I was brave, maybe crazy, but I was a little concerned, but obviously not enough. And a lot of people were worried for me, though. They're like, Jim, don't quit your perfectly good job. There's nothing wrong with it. You're doing well. And I decided to go, and I went cold turkey too. Like, I quit my job and I had no income for a while. It took me 5 years to make my income back. 5.
Wow.
What's your story?
My story was I was in my first marriage at the time, and I'd started a network marketing business on the side, and then ended up finding my current company, How I Know Jordan, right? And read his Beach Money book. And my ex-husband wanted to travel a lot. And I was like, well, the only way I'm going to be able to travel is quit my job. And so I quit my job, but I got really complacent in my business because we had a business with his family that was making good money. But when I decided to get a divorce, that's when it was like, okay, I've got to make this work. I am on my own now and I've got to go build my business. And so I'd had some success right before I had left and gotten to a high level in our company. And then I was like, okay, I got to figure this out. I've got to figure out how to make my business. One of the commitments I made with that beach money lifestyle is I want a lifestyle where I don't have debt. I want to be able to have zero debt in my life, no credit card debt, no house payment. I do have a car payment right now, but I'm paying it off as quickly as possible. But I like that because then I can go. When you don't have debt, you have so much other choices. And a lot of people will go out and buy the McMansion when they're making it. And I'm like, I don't need that much house. It's just myself and my new husband. Like, I want to have a house that's comfortable, that's beautiful, but why put myself in debt to do it? Because to me, that's the freedom, be able to live, work, play anywhere. And after my husband and I got married, he's British. We spent 4 months in Australia and Southeast Asia with a lot of bills and debt. I would have never been able to do that. So I had the freedom, and I would take literally 1 day a week and say, okay, when we might be in Sydney, we might be in Melbourne. I'm working today. This is my only day I'm working. Let me have some meetings. And it would usually be weird hours because most of my clients were back in the US, but okay, this is the day I'm available if we need to do any meetings. Otherwise, I'm going back and playing. And it was fantastic.
All that stuff, houses and cars and boats and the debt, that's a burden.
It is.
And really the stuff ends up owning you. So people say, well, I own stuff. I own a house and my boat and my car, but it owns you. But I have a theory about why people who have jobs, who make good money, buy that stuff.
Okay. I'm curious.
The same reason they go out to dinner on Friday nights or Saturday nights, the same reason why they can't wait to go on that vacation. It's their escape. They darn well deserve that boat. Right. I work 5 days a week. I only get 2 weeks off a year, and they give me Christmas. Great. And gosh darn it, I'm going to buy what the heck I want. I want a Mercedes. I want a boat. I deserve it because I have to work for it. And so the difference is when you are in control of your business life, your work life, you don't need to make as much money to buy the toys because you don't need the toys because you have freedom. And that's my theory.
I like that theory. I know, because everyone's like, well, you could go buy a house somewhere. I'm like, because my husband and I love to scuba dive and travel. And I'm like, why do I want something to tie me down when I don't have a second home? I can go anywhere. I can go rent someone else's house for a week, 2 weeks. I can go anywhere I want and not be tied to a place, which to me is that definition of freedom.
You and I think a lot alike. So even if I had millions of extra dollars, I don't believe my wife and I would buy a lake house or a ski house. My philosophy is I'll rent someone else's house.
Right.
And if a hurricane comes, we'll just leave and let them deal with the mess. If there's an avalanche at the ski resort, not my house. Right. Why wouldn't I want to rent something I probably couldn't afford anyway? So think about this, everybody. You could rent a multi-million-dollar home for a week that you really might not want to be burdened with or couldn't even afford anyway.
Right.
But you can live like a king or queen for that period of time. And the way I see things is everything in life really is leased. You can't take it with you. When you die, it doesn't matter how much money you have for yourself. If you want to leave it behind, that's a whole other conversation. But you can't take the boat and the motorcycle and the house and the car with you. Mm-hmm. You can only enjoy the experiences. But I find as I get older, and tell me if this rings true with you, Callie, that experiences are definitely worth more than material things.
100%. I mean, in a few weeks, I'm heading out to Napa Valley with 3 other couples, my husband and I. I have a big birthday, turned 50 this year, and we're renting this amazing, it's like a 6-bedroom home, all king beds, everything opens out to a pool. Like, yeah, it's the multi-million-dollar home you're talking about, and we're just going to rent it for 4 days, and then 2 couples, we're going to go on to Pebble Beach and play golf. Like, if I owned something or had all these houses or this or tied to a job, I wouldn't have the freedom and flexibility to go do all that. And to me, that's an experience, and that's what life is about.
You see, I think true freedom isn't owning all this stuff. It's being nimble. And a problem with owning, let's say it's the house at the beach and the ski home. Let's say you even have the money. If you're not wealthy enough, and I'm talking about uber wealth, where you have a staff that manages the avalanche.
Right.
You don't even know about it. All you do is you hear from your executive assistant who's making $4 million a year. They would say, Mr. Klauck, have some news. You know that house? Oh yeah, that one. Yeah, it's gone. Okay. Right. Okay. But most people aren't at that level. Right. So you have to deal with getting that phone call from the property management company, because you do rent that house out part-time when you're not in it at Vail, okay? And you get a call from the person who's helping you with that home, the property management company, and they say, by the way, the house was hit by an avalanche. Everything you're doing that day is stopped. Yeah. Because now you got to deal with the house that's splintered, literally.
Right.
And there's floods.
And if you still owe money on it and your insurance isn't, I mean, it's
a headache.
Lots of headaches.
Yep. And then some people say, yeah, it's a good investment. There's other ways to invest in real estate where you don't have to deal with it.
Right.
So I totally agree with you. For my wife and I, it's all about experiences. Now, I kind of cheated because I married a flight attendant. So we travel. And we travel anywhere we want, whenever we want. And we have access to hundreds of jet planes, literally hundreds of jet planes. And it's great. And travel's not for everybody. So let's say that you still want to have freedom, Callie, but you don't want to travel so much or you're burnt out from traveling. Still, getting up at 10 o'clock in the morning, because that's when you want to get up, and having your first meeting at noon wouldn't be bad. Most people have to get up at 5:30, stuff food in their mouth, get the kids off to school, drive in traffic to get to that meeting that they really don't want to go to.
Right. I went to yoga class at 9 a.m. this morning. Case in point. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. And in my life, I did get up. One of my dreams and something I live by, except when I have to get on an airplane early, and I try to avoid that, is I don't wake up to an alarm clock. That was freedom to me. I did not want to have to be tied to an alarm clock. And most days, today I was up at 5:30, which I don't know why, but most days I wake up between 6 and 7. My body is trained.
Yeah.
If I need a little extra sleep, I've got it. And again, I only set that alarm on airplane days because then I know I can sleep well and not have to worry, am I going to wake up? But yeah, that was a huge part of freedom. I remember those corporate days that we talked about and hitting that, snooze and hitting it again, which is like horrible for your sleep. Now I know that now, but like, because it was the dread of having to get up. And then I tried to work out before. So now I'm getting up at like 5 a.m. to go work out. And then we both live in the Houston area, sitting in, 7 a.m. Houston traffic, pre-COVID, long pre-COVID, where it was insane. You knew when school started because end of August, traffic went crazy. Your commute doubled.
Mm-hmm. So I don't know if you know this. This is very interesting. And if you don't know this, you can look it up. That alarm clocks will reduce the amount of years you live. And there are two reasons. One reason is it can cause a heart attack. Now you're thinking, what does that mean? When you're sleeping, we're designed. So if you think about before all of the rat race stuff, you go back to when we were living, on the dirt. All right. When we were woken up by something like that, there was an emergency. There's a problem. Someone's attacking us. We're getting eaten or something. And the cortisol goes way up in our body. And it's very dangerous. You can get a heart attack. That's what they say. Also, to your point, your sleep is disturbed. If you're meant to sleep until 7, but you have to wake up at 5 with the alarm clock and you only got 5 or 6 hours of sleep, that's not good for your circadian rhythm. It's not good for you. And in theory, you will die younger, everything else being equal. And so we were never meant to wake up with an alarm clock. And if anyone says we were, really figure that out. It never existed. That's all man-made. We weren't supposed to get run over by cars when we crossed the street because there was no street and there was no car. So all these things that we create are hazards to our life. And we weren't meant to be stressed at work. We weren't meant to be in cubicles or in dark buildings all day. I mean, and so, I spend at least 90 minutes a day outside in the sun. I live on a little ranch in Texas. But I do work, and I work when I want to work, when I need to work, and I work with who I want to work with. Let's talk about that. Isn't that important to work with people you want to work with?
Oh, completely important, right? Because it's the energy level. If you think about, I want to work with happy, positive minded people, not people that are negative. I was having a conversation yesterday with someone and it was just negative. I was drained after that call. I'm like, I have got to get myself off this phone call because it's that energy. And so I'm always looking for those positive minded people. Maybe their circumstances aren't in the best place right now, right? Maybe they're looking for that beach money life. They don't have it yet. They haven't been introduced to it, but their mindset is one of, okay, I can get out of this instead of wallowing in the mire and the misery.
I find though, most people don't change. It's what they say about like rich people. Okay. Money is not going to change who you are, right? So if you're a nice person and you have $1 billion, you're still a nice person. If you're a jerk, you're even a bigger jerk now at $1 billion. That's right. So from my experience in life, people generally don't change a heck of a lot. Now, if they're short-term stressed, that's one thing. But I agree with you. I don't like spending time with people who drain me. And I have a rule. I will not spend my time with people who aren't good for me.
Good rule.
If they ask for my help and I think I can help them and they want my help and I think I can help them, then I'll put up with some stuff for a while. But if they keep coming back with negative things saying, I can't do this, it's not fair, I'm a victim, I say, you got to get rid of that. And you're only draining me. You're not sharpening my saw. You're dulling me. And it might sound kind of selfish, but you don't want to have cancer in your life and have it pull you down. So when you spend time with successful people like Jordan, Jordan's one of the most even-keeled, successful person I know. He's almost nondescript, right? He's just a guy. He's not like supercharged. Even when he's on stage, he's not like, some of the people in network marketing. They're literally in the air. Like they're jumping up and down. No, he's just a guy. Knows a lot of people. He connects people, very calm. And I love spending time with him because he connects me with people like you, Callie. And he's smart, and he's grown his business after many failures.
Right.
Grown his business consistently over time. And he's a leader in send out cards.
He is. Yep. Send out cards and promptings. And I recently saw him. We were in Vegas. And so we had brunch and had a cigar together. And Jordan's the only person in the world I smoke cigars with. It's funny.
He loves his cigars so much, he has his own brand.
He does. He does. I actually just bought some for a gift for a friend, the friends that were with us in Vegas. So we spent, I don't know, several hours together just hanging out. And he's even keeled. He carry a conversation with everyone. And it was funny because my friend's like, okay, what else does he do besides your business? I'm like, that's his main business. Really? And she's full-time corporate America. So it's just like a whole different mentality.
It's really hard for people to understand who have a regular W-2 job, especially in the corporate world, who, let's say someone's making a lot of money. A lot of money could be $250,000. That's a lot of money. But some people in network marketing could be making millions.
Right.
And people say that's not true. That's just a bunch of hype. That's a bunch of noise. Or, well, it's only that one person at the top. Could be a handful of people at the top. And there's all kinds of people like in the middle who make a living from it. And then, of course, there's a lot of people who don't do much.
There is a lot of people who don't do much. It's like anything. If you think about real estate, it's the same thing. If you look at real estate agents,
yes,
right? Lots of people who get their licenses every month. And how many of them go on to make the millions? And there's real estate agents out there making millions. There's real estate agents making not a zilch nothing, right? Same thing in network marketing.
I know quite a bit about real estate agents. My mom was one, and I've worked with a lot. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you would know more than I would. I think that if you apply yourself in a network marketing organization, you can be more financially successful over time than you can in real estate. And the reason why is you don't have to duplicate your time over and over again.
Right. It's residual income. That's the difference. With real estate, you only get paid when you make that transaction. And real estate's just gone crazy as well with the whole seller side, right? There's lots of them freaking out. But with network marketing, over time, if you do that consistent activity day in, day out, you build a team, you're creating that residual income every time any type of user purchases something, right? So you're getting paid not on only your efforts, but the efforts of your team, which is huge, right? That gives you leverage. And it takes leverage to have beach money and be able to have the freedom we're talking about.
Most people who are considered self-employed or solopreneurs, which would be the average real estate agent, and let's say Jordan.
Right.
Jordan may technically own a company, but he is the company.
Right.
And when you look at the two different, the realtor and Jordan, for instance, the realtor has to every day go out and repeat to make what they made yesterday. So for them to grow, it's very difficult. They can build a team and have some people do stuff. But, to your point, in network marketing, you just keep doing it and doing it and doing it. And if you want to take a month off, you can still make the same amount of money you made last month.
Right. And I would say make sure that it's not your first month you're taking off, right? That's the beauty.
Well, good point. That's a good point.
It's that consistent effort over time. I mean, I lost my parents a few years ago, and I was able to have that time to heal, right? I didn't have to worry about going to a funeral, and we had one in Texas, one in Indiana when my mom passed away, and I was able to have the time to heal. I mean, that's not why you want to be able to have beach money and the freedom, but it was really nice. I didn't have to worry about going to an office and dealing with emotions and life and selling their home and all of that while I was trying to work. And let's face it, most people work more than 40 hours in a job. Working 50, 60 hours in a job and dealing with life. In this business, I was able to do what was important, but then take the time to heal that I needed.
Beach money gives you options, but I'll tell you what's interesting about it. And I know you know this is true because you and I live in the same world, which is the United States of America. Well, that's part of the world, but within the confines of the United States, you could say the same thing for the UK and Canada and Australia and any other civilized, growing economy nation. And that is, you need to work every day and you need to work hard to be successful. And that's not true, but that's how we were raised. That I didn't know
ingrained in us. Yeah, I didn't either. Ingrained in us.
No. We were brainwashed.
Yeah.
It's true. And so if you ask any young person who's in high school or college, they'll be like, yeah, that hasn't changed. So my grandfather said, and my grandmother and my mom, and yeah, I'm going to go to college and I'm going to become a doctor, or I'm going to become a salesperson or a marketing person, and I'm going to get a job, and I'm going to get my 2 weeks off a year, and I'm going to get paid by the company. And they don't think outside that box. They're in this prison box. You can make your own money. Most people are still getting an allowance when they're 30 and 40. And that allowance isn't from their parents. It's from the corporation, called a salary, a paycheck. You and I decided to, in our 30s, cut the umbilical cord and learn how to earn our own money, literally make money out of nothing. Most people who have a job, Callie, you know this, they don't create money. They get paid money for a job they do, but the money's made by the sales team, usually at that company, and it's distributed down to all departments in paychecks. That's not what you do, right? You actually create money.
Right. Yeah. I'm out building a team, selling things, and all of that. And then, I'm blessed. I do work with our corporate team as well, but, very non-traditional type of position that I have. And because I was like, why am I going to come out of field and I can't be an employee? I knew that. And so it's worked out great. I get to do what I love every day, and I have freedom and flexibility along with it.
Yeah. So I had a nightmare last night. I'm not kidding. And I woke up in a panic this morning. I have this nightmare every once in a while, and it's really, really interesting. I'm back in one of my old jobs as an employee.
That is a nightmare.
But I haven't been doing my job. Have you ever had one of these dreams? It's kind of like being back in college and not, taking the course you were supposed to take, and the next thing you know, there's an exam or something. So I haven't been doing my job. Here I am, a sales guy for this large company in the field. They think I've been doing my job, and I know that they're gonna terminate me. And I'm thinking, what am I going to do? And then I thought, oh yeah, I've got this side gig, which is actually what I'm doing today full time, and I have been for some time. And I have this nightmare, I don't know, 2-3 times a year, and it's really upsetting. But I guess it was my prison, and I have this nightmare about prison. And I will tell you this, regardless of what happens to my income today, I will never go back to that world. Now, I'll be honest with you, at my age, no one's taking me back for many reasons. First of all, they would have been trying to get rid of me years ago because of my age. And number two, they don't want me because I don't fit, because I'll tell them what to do and they don't want to hear that. So luckily, my wife and I are in a position, God forbid, but if it happened, we could manage without having to work. And that's important, right? Because that boat payment would have killed me. That extra house could have, the third, fourth car, right? So my point is when you're making money, especially when you're not so sure of the future, if you can put it somewhere like a squirrel,
Right.
Then if something happens, you can slow down or regroup. And if it takes you 18 months to get back up again, because the first time it took me 5 years, then you have choices and you're not panicking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's all the information's out there. I mean, I've been reading, and I thought I'd read it before, but now that I'm reading it, maybe, but Richest Man in Babylon,
Yep.
right?
Got it. Yep.
Putting away that 10%, right? Putting it away. And I luckily had a really good teacher in high school. I even learned to do that when I was in corporate. So being able to put that away and creating that nest egg and being able then to go and create a business. That's part of why I didn't want to have debt. If something ever happens and I need to change, pivot, right? If you don't have debt, you can cut back your expenses pretty easily and go and do what you need to do.
Yeah. Most Americans aren't close to that.
Mm-mm.
We, the people, our government, we're not close to that. We owe many trillions.
Right.
Even the government's not good at it. Yet they're trying to help us be good at it by, putting programs together like 401k and so forth, which is great. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that the government's not doing a good job. The average American is in debt. We are 1980s, 2008, or 1929 away from a problem. Do you remember what happened in 08? That was the last biggest recession we had, I'm pretty sure. And that's when people lost homes and jobs. And really, I didn't think it was all that bad because we had a lot worse times. Today, people are like this. Mm-hmm. We're going to have another continued downturn that's going to cause some problems for people. Inflation's been high, so prices are kind of high. Real estate, the interest rates have been high, relatively high. Not high, but relatively high from the low rates. And I think a lot of people are kind of barely balancing it. And one small issue with the economy, there's going to be a lot of fallout.
Right. And I remember 08 and 09, but it didn't seem bad to me. But I think it was the mindset and the philosophy. And
yeah, the best years of my business were then. It just so happened to be the business I was in and the trajectory. The company that I had started was moving up, and I didn't have a problem except for, this is interesting. My wife and I wanted to buy a house, but I had left the corporate world not far prior to that. Okay.
Right.
In 08, 09, unless you were making $6 billion a year and had a 12,000 credit score, by the way, those numbers don't exist, everybody, but everything had to be perfect because the banks weren't lending to anybody.
They weren't.
So we wanted to move to another part of town. And so the only uncomfortable thing, which ended up being a great thing, is when we sold our house, we couldn't get a new mortgage because of the crisis, and there was a banking crisis.
Right.
We were afraid of everybody, and I wasn't in business long enough. And that's a whole other thing. It takes a while to build your credentials when you don't have a job, which is really ironic because you can lose your job like that. But anyway,
right.
But here's the blessing. We leased a beautiful, it was over 5,000 square foot home. It was $1 million home that the people didn't want to sell because there was a downturn in the market. We got a great deal on a mansion that we lived in for 2 years. I would never bought the house. We talked about experiences, right? So it was great. And then we got to figure out where we wanted to go after, and then ultimately bought the ranch we live at. But it actually turned out to be a good thing. And it's really kind of what you do with the lemons, right? You just got to figure out, okay, if things are slow, just because everyone says that the economy is bad doesn't mean you have to follow them. Stop for a sec, watch them go off the cliff and say, what can I do different?
Yeah. And it's so important in investing your money. I mean, when I went through my divorce, I had enough money to buy a house, pretty nice house, but I decided to invest that money. Mm-hmm. Because what I was going to make on the investments was more than what I was going to pay in rent. And then I could figure out where I wanted to go in my life and what to do with my life.
Yeah. So if my wife and I bought that $1 million house, we would have had to put $200,000 down for a traditional loan, 20%.
Right.
So we'd have $200,000 sitting there we can't do anything with. A business owner of my size should not have $200,000 tied up.
You need to be liquid. You need the liquid cash.
Exactly. So some people said, why are you spending thousands of dollars a month in rent? You're throwing money out the window. And I put together the spreadsheet where it showed that I wasn't throwing money out the window, because I would have had 200 grand, and you multiply that by, let's say, 7 or 8%. That would be a loss, because
Right.
you don't get the money out of it. If I were to buy it and sell the house, I'm paying 6% on $1 million. That's 60 grand I'd never get back.
Right.
Then there's maintenance and everything else, and it was a way better deal. We were able to live in that house. We didn't live there for over 7 years, but my calculation said we'd have to live there for over 7 years to be able to break even on the purchase.
My sister's a CPA, and that's what, when I bought this house, she's like, you need to make sure you're going to be there more than 7 years, or you're throwing away money. That's the number she's always given me. When you get ready to buy a house, make sure, because it's 7 years. You're not going to make any money.
People's, once again, brainwashed. We've all been sold this. You deserve and you should buy a house because it's a good investment. Renting's, a waste of money. As Dave Ramsey says, no one's ever been foreclosed on a paid for house. So if you don't owe money, you can't be foreclosed on.
Right.
I'd rather have a ding on my credit report because I couldn't pay my rent than have a house foreclosed on. That's brutal.
Right. Because that money you're never getting back.
No. And
into it. Yeah.
And it hurts more on your credit. And I think it is also really bad for your head. I'd much rather say to myself, yeah, that landlord, he kind of lost out on the last 2 months of rent, versus saying I was foreclosed on by a bank.
Right.
Something about foreclosure that's pretty, I don't know.
Right.
That's like bankruptcy.
Yeah, can definitely mess with you.
And but we're told, you need a house, you have to buy it, you have to own it. And the reality is people don't own it. They say, yes, Jim, you didn't listen to me. I own the house. I said, well, do you have a mortgage? Yeah. I said, you don't own the house. They're like, I own the house. I said, you don't own the house.
The bank owns your house.
And they say, I'm not renting it. I said, you kind of are leasing it from the bank. The bank is the first lien holder.
Mm-hmm.
They're in charge. You can do what you want to the house for the most part. They're not going to bother you. But when push comes to shove, they're in charge to the last dollar. If you skip out on the last dollar and you pay 200 grand, but you owe 201, 200 grand, $1, you don't pay it, they'll take the whole house.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And if you don't pay your taxes, the government will take your house. And in some cases, if the HOA wants to take your house because you didn't pay their dues, in some cases they can.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. And so, like I said before, you can't take it with you. It could be a good investment if you're bad at saving money on the side. For some people, after 30 years, if they pay off their mortgage, then fine, they've got equity, and that's not bad. I mean, there's a lot of wealth. Actually, most of the wealth in the U.S. is in real estate. So, but you got to stay there.
Right. You can't move and then let's get the next bigger house and the next bigger house. And yeah.
Callie, we've covered a lot. What have we missed here that you would like to talk about before we conclude?
Good question. I just think, I had heard several years ago on a podcast, right? This whole thing about living life and having freedom was no debt, right? And that's something that stuck with me. And so if I could leave something with the listeners here, it's how do you live life without debt? Because that's where true freedom truly comes from, right? As we talked about, you don't own the house until that last dollar is paid off. The car, and yes, I decided I wanted the fancy car after having my last one for 10 years. And so I have a little bit of debt, but it's the only thing. Yeah. But what is, like, if you're not paying debt and not credit card debt, how much more do you have available, right? People think, oh, well, it's just it's just credit card debt. It's not a big deal. Yeah, it is. You're paying so much more for that meal. You go out for a meal and you ate it then, and that you're paying interest on that. Like, you just paid so much more for a meal. And if you're compounding that, so how do you get out of it and stay out of it? Because that's going to give you freedom.
If you are putting your luxuries like meals out, a dinner out on your credit card, and you're paying interest on it, stop. If you need to put your groceries on a credit card, then fine. If you need to, you got to eat. But try not to. But there's no excuse to be going out to Fridays and spending, $80 or maybe more now. What does it cost? I don't know what it costs. $100 to go out to dinner for four people.
To go out.
Yeah. Okay. $100, and you're paying 24% interest compounding.
Right.
You're paying hundreds and hundreds of dollars for that meal. And it's no, but Americans,
because it's
are
what
consumers.
Right. We are
Callie,
consumers.
yeah. So I heard something a while back. I don't know if you've noticed this or not, and of course you wouldn't remember originally, but sometime in the 1950s, which you and I weren't around, the government started referring to its citizens as consumers. So do you notice when you listen to the news, they don't call us citizens,
It's
consumers.
You're right, they do.
Everything's about so it's consumerism, and so the United States looks at us, whether it's the people selling us stuff or the government, as consumers. And everybody, including the government, especially the government, wants us to continue to consume. That's why they're always all over the interest rates and so forth. It's, they're managing it all, because if we don't consume and if we don't go into debt, we crash. We are on a drug of consuming, not just us as individuals, the country. So when I was young, my parents paid cash for almost everything, like you do,
right?
Cars and so forth. Almost no one pays cash for houses and cars.
No,
no,
not at all.
Can you imagine if the government said, hey, starting tomorrow, you can't buy anything on credit? Our country would spiral.
It would.
Now, I know this is kind of off the beaten path a bit. I know you didn't expect to go down this road, but we're probably going to hit something pretty hard because there's more Americans, more debt. The country has more debt. And all we need to have is one little thing go off, and the bigger you are, the harder you fall. And I think our financial crises going forward will be bigger and bigger because there's more of us. So there'll be higher unemployment, meaning more people, more foreclosures because there's more people, and probably harder to climb out of it. But how do we get off this drug of keeping the economy going forward? Because you know what a recession is? It's 2 consecutive quarters going backward.
Yep.
So every quarter we need to move forward.
Which is great.
How do we do that? Because we're no longer a GDP of this size. We're this size. So it's bigger and bigger and bigger. I know you didn't sign up for that. Sorry. I'm on my soapbox a bit, but it plays off of what you're talking about. If you're not in debt and you have some cash reserves, you can weather the storm way better than other people.
Right. And you can not work and be able to have choices and pick the things that are right for you instead of being desperate and saying, I lost my job, I got to take whatever there is. Right. You have the resources to weather the storm. And I think, going to the beach is fabulous. But for me, that knowing that if something happens in my life, we're okay.
Mm-hmm.
My house is okay. Right. I have a place to live and a place to put my head at night.
Yeah, well, you're not a drug addict apparently, because a lot of people are addicted to this drug of consumerism, and they always think that it's going to be better to have the boat and buy that extra house and go out to dinner and all this stuff, and then they wake up the next day, not any happier.
Right.
So it can't really buy you happiness, and I find my happiness has come from shedding that stuff
Mhm.
and finding true happiness in the present. And
Right.
it's not for everybody, but it's really the way I think we used to live. I mean, if you think about thousands of years ago, thousands and thousands of years ago, people did just survive. Let's be fair. They woke up to
Right.
survive, but they didn't have the stresses we have.
Very true.
They had different stress of, but they didn't really think about, I'm going to die of starvation. And they didn't. They just foraged and at some point farmed and they hunted and they just got by and they reproduced, and it was kind of boring, simple. Then when we figured all this stuff out in the past 100, 200 years, it was, we compounded our knowledge. I don't know if it's a better place for humanity, but here we are.
Here we are.
Callie, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for hearing me out.
It was great. I love having these conversations.
Let's do it again soon. And Jordan, thank you so much for allowing us to get together.
Thanks, Jordan. Thanks, Jim. So good to be here.